You know that small pause, don't you, when you open a pension letter and your eyes land on a few odd letters and numbers? Nothing looks dramatic, no red warning box, no loud message telling you to worry, but something still feels off, because the amount in your bank seems a bit thinner than you expected, and you are left wondering whether this is normal or whether money is quietly slipping away while nobody explains a thing. If this channel helps you make better sense of rules like these, do stay close and subscribe, because a lot of this money is not won by doing something clever, but by spotting something small before it turns into a long and expensive mistake. Today, I want to talk about one simple idea that sits underneath this whole video. In retirement, small codes can move big money. They look harmless, almost boring, but they can decide how much tax comes off your pension, whether HMRC thinks your allowance has gone to the right place, and whether an error drags on for months. And June matters more than many people realize. By then, most pensioners have seen the first payments of the new tax year, the new state pension rate has started feeding through, and new tax codes have often landed. So June is not some magic legal deadline, but it is a very sensible checkpoint before a small error becomes your new normal. There are 4 codes I would especially want any pensioner over 60 to notice. Not because every one of them is bad, and not because every change means trouble, but because each one tells a story about where your tax-free allowance has gone and whether the tax system has understood your retirement income properly. The first code is 1257L, and in many cases this is the calm one. A lot of people see 1257L on a pension slip and feel nervous just because they do not know what it means. In plain English, it is the standard tax code most people have for one main job or one main pension. It usually means the normal personal allowance is being used there, which is the chunk of income you can have before tax starts. Now that does not mean every 1257L is automatically perfect. It only means that, on that income source, HMRC is treating you as if that is where your main tax-free allowance belongs. If you have one private pension and little else, that may be exactly right. But if you also have another pension, earnings from part-time work, or tax due on your state pension, the picture can change. This is the first phrase I would write down. 1257L usually means normal, but normal for which income? That question matters because the code itself can look fine while the overall setup is wrong. A pensioner can have a perfectly ordinary-looking code on one pension and still be overpaying because the allowance has been placed in the wrong spot. So when you see 1257L, do not stop at relief. Check whether this is the pension you want carrying your allowance, usually the largest taxable income source after retirement. If that kind of practical checking is useful to you, you might want to subscribe and keep this channel nearby, because retirement tax often goes wrong in quiet, ordinary ways rather than dramatic ones. The second code to watch is BR, and this is where many older people lose confidence. They see 2 letters, do not know what they mean, and assume somebody official must have got it right. BR means basic rate, which in plain terms means every pound from that job or pension is being taxed at the basic rate. There is no tax-free allowance being used on that income source at all. Sometimes BR is perfectly correct. If you have more than one pension, or a pension plus part-time work, HMRC may decide your allowance belongs on the main source, and the second source should be taxed at basic rate. That is not a scandal. That is just the system dividing your income across different payers. But here is where the trouble starts. A lot of pensioners see BR and never ask the follow-up question, which is this: has HMRC put my allowance on the right pension, or has it simply parked BR here because the records are incomplete? That is the difference between a tidy arrangement and a quiet drain on your income. Let me give you Margaret, who is 68 and lives on her state pension, a small teacher's pension, and a modest private pension. She noticed one pension was on BR and assumed that meant she had crossed some new tax line because of age. What had really happened was much more ordinary. HMRC had pushed the allowance onto the smaller income source, so more tax was coming off the larger one than she expected. Margaret did not need a dramatic appeal or a paid advisor. She simply needed the right sentence in her head, which was this: BR is not always wrong, but I must check where my allowance has gone. Once she checked the income details and had the code aligned to the right pension, the whole thing made more sense, And that is a good moment to stay subscribed too, because often the real win is not chasing money, but understanding the map. The third code is OT, and this one deserves real attention. If you see 0T, it means no personal allowance is being given on that income source. In plain terms, the payer is taxing the pension without a tax-free chunk attached to it. That can happen because your allowance has been used elsewhere, or because the payer does not yet have the right details. Now, I want to add three little extras here that matter just as much. If the code also has W1, M1, or X attached, that usually points to emergency or temporary treatment. Week 1, month 1, or X means the system is not looking back across the whole tax year in the usual way. It is treating each payment in isolation, which can easily lead to overtaxing, especially after a first pension withdrawal. This often happens when someone takes money from a pension pot for the first time. They think they are pulling out one amount for the boiler, the car, or to help a child, and then they stare at the payment and think, hold on, where on earth has that tax come from? What has happened is not always a final bill. Sometimes it is just a temporary rough guess made before the records catch up. So write this phrase down as well. 0T means no allowance showing, and W1, M1, or X means temporary alarm bell. That does not mean panic, but it does mean do not ignore it. If this is the sort of plain English checking you want more of, subscribe now, because these small flags can save a great deal of confusion later. The fourth code is K, and this is the one that often gives people a real jolt. A K code means you have untaxed income or deductions that are bigger than your allowance, so HMRC is trying to collect that tax through this pension or job. Very often, the hidden piece in the background is the state pension, because the state pension is taxable, but tax is not usually taken off it before it reaches you. That point catches people out every year. They think, quite reasonably, that because the state pension arrives without tax being taken, it must somehow be outside the system. It is not. If your total income is high enough to owe tax, HMRC often uses a private or workplace pension code to collect the tax that relates to the state pension. A K code can also appear because tax is being collected from an earlier year, or because there is another untaxed amount in the background that HMRC has loaded into the code. The important thing is not to treat K as a moral judgment, as if you have done something wrong. It is an instruction code. It tells your pension provider to take more tax because HMRC thinks there is tax to catch somewhere else. Still, K should never be shrugged off. It can take a painful bite out of monthly income, even though there is a limit on how much can be taken through that code. So the phrase to remember is this: K means tax is being added back in, and I need to know why. If you like having these things translated into everyday language, that is a good reason to keep following along with the channel. Now let us tie those four codes back to the central theme, because this is where people miss the real lesson. 1257L, BR, OT, and K are not just labels, they are little clues telling you where your allowance sits, whether another income source is affecting this one, and whether HMRC's picture of your retirement income is complete or patchy. And this is exactly why June is such a useful month to check them. By June, you have usually had enough paperwork and enough payments to spot a pattern. If the April payment looked odd, and the May payment still looked odd, and the code has not corrected, that is the moment to stop hoping it will sort itself out and start checking the details calmly. A lot of pensioners over 60 also have more than one moving part at the same time. A state pension goes up, a private pension pays monthly, maybe a small part-time wage still comes in, maybe savings interest has risen, or maybe a one-off pension withdrawal has happened. HMRC can only work with the picture it has. If one piece lands late or in the wrong place, the code can wobble. That is why I never tell people to stare only at the letters. Look at the relationship between the code and the income source. Ask yourself, is my main allowance sitting on the largest pension or somewhere less helpful? Is my state pension being silently accounted for through another provider? And does this month's net amount feel in step with what the code is supposed to be doing? Here is another quiet truth many people need to hear. Not every odd code means you are being robbed, and not every standard-looking code means you are safe. Retirement tax is often about allocation, not drama. If that thought alone has made this feel less foggy, subscribe and stay with me, because the best financial protection is often a calm understanding before a costly surprise. There is also a very human reason people leave this too long. They are tired of forms, tired of waiting on hold, tired of feeling that every official system speaks a different language, so they tell themselves they will look next month. But a code that is wrong in April can still be wrong in September if nobody pushes back. Think of David, who is 71 and recently started taking a little extra from a flexible pension pot. He wanted to pay for repairs after a leak in the loft. Nothing extravagant, just a sensible use of his own money. The first payment came through looking far smaller than he expected. He assumed that meant the tax bill must be final, and for 6 weeks he simply absorbed the shock and tightened everything else. What David did not know was that first flexible withdrawals can trigger emergency treatment. That is where those temporary signs matter so much. Sometimes the tax taken is too high for the full year position and can later be corrected, and in some cases there are refund routes depending on what exactly was taken and whether the whole pot was emptied. The money felt gone for good, but the story was not finished. If you have taken a flexible pension payment and the tax looks far too heavy, do not just mutter that the government has had its share and leave it there. There are specific refund forms in some cases, such as P55, P53Z, or P50Z, depending on the situation. You do not need to memorize the form names today. What matters is the principle. First deductions on pension withdrawals can be rough, temporary, and worth checking. Now, before June is out, I would do one simple ritual. Get your latest pension pay slip or pension advice, your tax code notice if you have one, and last year's P60 if it helps. Then ask 4 plain questions. What code is on each income source? Which one is carrying my allowance? Is my state pension affecting this code? And has anything changed since April? If you use HMRC's online tax service, check the employment and pension details showing there. If you do not use online services, get someone you trust to sit with you or ask for help the old-fashioned way by phone or letter. There is no shame in that at all. The mistake is not needing help. The mistake is leaving an unclear code untouched simply because it feels annoying. And do be careful with who offers to fix it. Tax confusion is fertile ground for scams, especially for older people who are trying to do the right thing quickly. A real correction usually starts with your actual pension paperwork, your tax account, or direct contact with HMRC, not with a random text, a link in an email, or a stranger promising an instant rebate. This is where the central theme comes back once more. Small codes move big money, but small habits protect it as well. One calm check in June can prevent months of overpaying, underpaying, or living with the wrong fear. That matters, because peace of mind in retirement is not a luxury. It is part of what you spent a lifetime working for. If your code is wrong, the next step is not to argue with the pension provider as if they invented it. Usually they are applying the code they were given. What you need to check is whether HMRC has the right picture of your pensions, your estimated taxable income, any company benefits, any expenses reliefs, and whether an old job or old income source is still sitting on the record. Wrong code often means wrong or missing information. And here is a phrase that can save you from a lot of flapping. Do not ask only, why is my tax high? Ask, what income is this code trying to account for? That question is calmer, sharper, and much more useful. It moves you away from fear and towards the actual mechanics of the problem. Sometimes the answer will be reassuring. A BR code on a small second pension may be fine because your main allowance is already doing its job elsewhere. A 1257L code may be entirely right for your main pension. Even a K code may turn out to reflect tax due on the state pension in a way that is expected. The goal is not to force every code to look friendly. The goal is to understand whether it fits your real life. Other times, the answer will show a clear mismatch. An old job may still be on the system. A new pension may have been treated as if it were your only income. A first withdrawal may have triggered emergency tax that never properly settled. And once you see the mismatch, the problem becomes much more manageable because now you are not dealing with a mystery, only with a correction. If you know one person who would never click on a tax video for themselves, but would quietly benefit from this, perhaps a brother, a neighbor, an older friend, or one of your parents, if you are helping them, do send this to them as a small act of care. Sometimes the kindest thing we can pass on is not money, but a bit of plain understanding that stops someone feeling lost in front of official paperwork. I also want to say this for the people who feel embarrassed by all of it. Please do not confuse unfamiliarity with foolishness. These systems change, letters arrive out of order, codes use shorthand, and retirement income often comes from more than one place. You are not silly for needing to slow it down and read it properly. You are being sensible. So if you remember nothing else from today, remember the four codes and the four plain meanings. 1257L usually means the standard allowance is sitting there. BR means that income is being taxed at the basic rate with no allowance on it. 0T means no allowance is showing, and W1, M1, or X can signal temporary emergency treatment. K means HMRC is collecting tax for untaxed income or deductions through that pension. And remember the June check. Not because June has some magical power, but because it is early enough to catch the year before it hardens. By then you can see the first shape of the new tax year. You can notice whether April was a one-off wobble or the beginning of a pattern. That is how ordinary people stay in control without needing to become tax experts. I think of retirement a bit like a house you spent years building, room by room, payment by payment, habit by habit. Most of the time, nothing dramatic goes wrong. But somewhere near the front door, there is a small fuse box with tiny labels on it. If one label is wrong, one room goes dim, then another, and you can end up living around the fault instead of fixing it. These tax codes are a little like those labels. They are not the whole house, and they are not your whole life, but they do tell the current where to go. When you read them carefully and correct them early, the light comes back to where it belongs. And there is something deeply dignified in that, because keeping hold of your own money is not greed, fuss, or panic. It is simply good housekeeping after a lifetime of work. So take a quiet look before June slips away. Check the code, check the income source, and check the story those letters are trying to tell. Very often, the difference between confusion and confidence is only one calm afternoon and one small correction, and sometimes that is all it takes for the whole house to feel settled again.